Hello, and welcome to this episode of Family Medicine on Air. I am Brian Blank, a student chair to the upcoming national conference.
And I'm Richard Bruno, resident chair for the national conference this year.
And we are so excited that you guys are joining us. Together, Richard and I are going to spend a few minutes here talking about what's going to be going on at this national conference when it comes to resolution writing. So this is a really fun part of the leadership portion of the conference. And so our attempt will be to we want to put things in context as to what's going on within the national conference and then dive in a little bit deeper, more towards the end of the video, of how to write a resolution and what that means and everything that entails. So just starting by putting things in perspective here, so the national conference is coming up. It's going to be the best national conference there has ever been. And there's basically three main parts to the national conference. So there's all of the educational sessions that are happening. So that's where you've got speakers who will be maybe speaking to all the students and residents who are gathered there, and there will be workshops going on, and you have the option to attend all of those. The second part of the national conference that really will be happening is the residencies will be on display in the expo hall. So more than 2/3, I believe, of all of the family medicine residencies are in the expo hall, and those are opportunities for students to see them and for them to meet students, and that is just a wonderful part of the conference. And then the third part, which we're going to be talking about here today, is what is happening during the leadership session that happens in the national conference, and that is where students and residents will each have their own sort of separate congress where they will meet and talk about ideas, resolutions, subjects that are of importance to students and residents, talk about the idea of passing resolutions in regards to those topics, and then sort of pushing those through the AAFP machinery.
That's right. Brian and I are going to lead you through this process today, and both of us have been working on resolutions throughout our time coming to national conferences over the last few years. I think Brian and I have been working on resolutions I've been there, this will be my 7th year there, and I think I've authored over 40 resolutions, so this is something that I hold near and dear to my heart as being able to contribute to the Academy, and actually, the national the Academy in general is one of the few national organizations that allows students and residents this opportunity to put forth resolutions and to have a voice within the Academy and really help guide its efforts on policies they think are important.
And this will be my 3rd national conference. I think that I've basically co-authored several, I want to say maybe 5 or so resolutions, and that has been really fun. It's fun to get excited about issues, and as family physicians, we've all got issues that we're excited about, but being able to meet other folks at the national conference who are excited about those same things and then follow up with them and really get to know how organized medicine works in regards to those issues. I mean, it has been an enjoyable experience, maybe one of the most enjoyable things that we've done with the AAFP since being there. So if you have any questions, Richard has written more than 40, so seek him out, find him at the national conference, and ask him all of your questions if they're not answered in this video that we're doing for you right now. So that's a little bit about what's going on. I'm going to share a screen here where we've got some slides and want to show you a little bit about how this is going to work when we are all there. So there we go. This is a little bit about what the schedule is going to look like for the weekend. So it's good to be thinking ahead of time about the issues that you're excited about and what in particular you might ask of the AAFP to do via these resolutions. Because when you come in Wednesday or Thursday or whenever you get there, we will have some time dedicated in that afternoon for these discussion groups. And you can see them all sort of listed there. And depending on what your issue is, you may find that you gravitate a little bit more towards one of these groups, whether it's the health of the public or it's an education issue, it's an advocacy issue, whatever you feel. And there'll be staff around who can sort of help you sort of work through this issue of figuring out where you want to go. But these discussion groups are going to be available, and these are times when you can meet with other students and residents and faculty members to work through your resolution, maybe brainstorm a little bit about how or what you might want to ask of the AAFP. So we really find these to be really helpful brainstorming opportunities. And then we have it that afternoon because then that evening, Thursday evening of the national conference, is when they're going to be due. So you can see there that we have a deadline of 6 p.m. that night. That's when the resolutions will be due, and then things kick off hot and heavy the next day on Friday, when basically the resolutions will all be sort of sorted and then put into reference committees. And so Friday afternoon, depending on which reference committee that you're a part of, or which reference committee that your resolution gets assigned to, will determine where the resolution is going to be talked about. And that's your opportunity to speak in person about what it is that you want to work through and to get some feedback. And then generally where things will go from there is then after the reference committee has heard your opinions, then they will meet later that day and evening maybe, and discuss as a reference committee what they think about your issue and where they think it would be, what they want to do with it. And then finally on Saturday, their report on all of the resolutions that they've heard, their reports will be available, and then that's an opportunity for the entire student congress or resident congress to meet together and then talk and vote about the specific resolutions that came up. So there's sort of like, you got this resolution, you submit it to a reference committee. The reference committee is sort of the first pass on what happens to your resolution, and then the second pass will be the entire Congress, which is where all of the student delegates and resident delegates from their state chapters meet to discuss these issues, exactly what we're talking about here.
And keep in mind that the reference committee reports will be available via the app and also during the spread throughout the convention center. So you'll have access on Friday morning to see where your resolution's been assigned, which reference committee, and then on Saturday morning you'll get the results of that reference committee decision to say whether or not they recommended adopting it or not. So next we'll take a look at what a resolution is and figure out what's the purpose of making these resolutions and what can they actually do within the academy. The resolution is most often a call for action or statement of belief, and it's really a vehicle by which the students and the residents can get their voice heard through the academy on up through the various commissions in the academy and even at the board level. So every year, the National Conference, we have a resident congress and a student congress, and they meet to discuss the reference committee decisions.
And this is exciting. These are exciting times when the congresses get together. This is where folks who are excited about a lot of issues have an opportunity to talk about the things that they're excited about and go forward from there. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Richard.
Oh, that's okay. Brian, what do you think about going through a model resolution?
Yeah. Okay, so on the slide screen right now, you should be able to see an example of what one of these things looks like. So you'll see the title of this resolution, the AAFP support increased WIC funding. And then you see the co-authors below. Looks like you've got a resident, potentially, and a medical student, Jane John Doe. And then you see 5 whereas clauses followed by a resolved clause. And as we'll talk a little bit here, the way that this is structured, or the way to start thinking about or reading one of these things, is really you want to start with the resolve clause at the end. So at the bottom, that last phrase, starting resolve, that the AAFP actively encouraged the United States Congress support increased funding for WIC to enable higher participation in the program. That is what the ask is here. So that is what this particular resolution is asking of the AAFP. So they wanted to work with Congress to support increased funding for WIC. And then the 5 whereas clauses above that are basically background on the resolve clause. So the 5 whereas clauses, I mean, you can see you don't have to have these in there, but there is a reference to this journal article. There is more background on the issue of a WIC program, and so those are things that people who are looking at this resolve clause that they may want to consider when they're actually considering the resolve clause. So background for the folks who are going to be on the reference committee or in the Congress perhaps, but mainly the reference committee when they're are first considering this. And then that resolve clause at the end, again, the most important part, it should be able to stand alone, because that's, if you're successful and everybody votes on your resolution and it passes, the whereas clauses will ultimately get stripped away, leaving the resolved clause by itself. So you need that resolve clause at the end. Again, the most important part to stand alone.
Great. So we'll move on to the purpose of the resolution, as we've sort of been discussing, is to maybe establish a new AAFP policy or add to an existing policy, to request the implementation of or investigation of a new program, maybe to address an issue of concern for the students and the residents and the specialty of family medicine in general, or to request the elimination of an AAFP activity that you might consider as non-essential.
So the first thing to be thinking about is obviously what you want to be talking about. The subject of interest to you. You can do that ahead of the Congress. If you think of one when you're there, then that's fine too. But generally, be thinking about what is your topic of interest, what do you want to ask of the AAFP, and then start thinking about, well, what is the AAFP already doing? So maybe doing a little bit of research, and the AAFP website is great for this. What is the AAFP policy on whatever it is that you're interested in? If you were doing that WIC proposition, for example, has the AAFP considered this in the past? What is their current policy on WIC funding? Who's working with it? So starting with the website, and then when you're at the national conference, actually you'll have the opportunity to meet with staff and faculty with the AAFP who can maybe talk you through a little bit, or maybe they've been around the AAFP for many years and they've seen similar resolutions go through. So talking to them can be another great resource. Thinking about what do you need, what's the AAFP already done, and what do you need to have happen to get the resolution to pass? Is there a financial note associated with what it is that you're asking? If so, how much do they think it might be? Is it within the authority of the AAFP to be considering this issue? Is it broad enough that it's going to be a national appeal, so the AAFP would be interested in pursuing it? So those sorts of things. The more research you can do ahead of time, just generally, the better off you'll be.
And what I found as well is that some of the more poignant resolutions and the ones that gain a lot of momentum are ones that are based on something that's relevant to the news, relevant to healthcare reform in general, to something that is going to be on the thoughts and hearts of those folks who are going to be listening to your resolution. Because if you can base it on something that's happening that's timely, then I think you can get a lot more folks interested in the topic as well. So also, for example, for the WIC thing, maybe there's a piece of legislation that is being proposed on the national level that increases funding for WIC, and maybe you don't call out that piece of legislation by name because sometimes names can change, but introducing this resolution along at the same time that maybe a federal piece of legislation is being introduced, that should be very timely and probably help your case as well.
Totally agree. On this next slide, you should be able to see some of the resources you can consider. So there's the resolutions part of the AAFP website, which is you'll find a database on there of previous resolutions that have been submitted to both of the Congresses. More on the mission and objectives of the AAFP. You can find what's been happening with the AAFP Congress of Delegates, which is sort of it's like the congresses that we have at the national conference, but it's more practicing physicians, so it's basically another sort of governing body of the AAFP, if you'd like. And yeah, as we mentioned, that you'll have the opportunity to meet with staff and faculty folks associated with the AAFP in the Resolution Writing Center room, which we'll have available, and there will be plenty of folks to chat with about your ideas. So definitely make the use of all of them.
Okay, so now what we'll try and do is go through a little bit about how to write the resolution and some pearls of wisdom from some of the staff and board members who have been a part of this process with the students and residents over the past few years. So we already sort of mentioned starting with the resolve clause and going backwards to build your case. with supporting whereas clauses. So we'll move on to the next slide here.
So things to keep in mind. Obviously you're going to be writing about something that you're excited about, and you'll have the opportunity to really express that enthusiasm when you're giving testimony for your resolution to the Congresses. But it's better to keep a lot of the more excited adjectives or qualifying adverbs, the editorial stuff, out of the resolution itself, the written resolution that you'll submit. So focus on the facts in that. You'll have the opportunity to get more editorial when you're speaking to folks, but really, this is meant to be more of a professional sort of fact-finding document, if that makes sense. Each resolved clause, you don't have to have just one. You can have more than one associated with your resolution, but try to limit each resolved clause to only one action. And so that might be, if you're asking maybe a couple things of the AAFP to consider, then you would want to break those up into separate resolve clauses. And if you do have more than one, you want to make sure that each one can stand alone. So if one resolve clause were to be stripped away for some reason of your resolution, would folks who are just reading that one resolve clause, could they understand the whole gist of your argument there? So what else? Yeah, one topic, one issue per resolution. So if you have a resolve clause that's really complicated, or maybe it's asking a couple different things of the AAFP, it might be better to consider breaking that off and making it a separate resolution. Again, sort of up to whatever it is that you're writing, but you don't have to. If you think it's going to be pretty involved, it might be better to just make a separate resolution and deal with that separately.
Great. So give a few quick tips from the experts. Dr. Henley is our CEO of the Academy. He says keep your resolve clauses short and to the point, and be clear about what's being requested. The ask needs to be clear in terms of its resolve clause, and for example, if the AAFP already has similar policy on the issue, it just becomes a Me Too resolution, which is a waste of organizational time.
So that's where research can be important. This next quote we have here from Diane McDonald from the Office of Governance of the AAFP. Too many resolutions focus on issues that relate only to an individual or a specific region rather than focus on the specialty or healthcare in general. So that can be important. If you're dealing with an issue that, let's say you're from Texas and you want the AAFP to take action on some Texas issue, it might be better working within the state chapter there or some other body to make that happen. So we really want to think sort of nationally in scale when you're submitting these resolutions to the AAFP, because that's what the AAFP focuses on.
Great. Perry Puno, who is our former Vice President for Education, wants you to be aware that the AAFP has limited resources and we must use them judiciously toward targeted priorities. The best resolutions recommend that the AAFP investigate a particular strategy, and if in doing so the AAFP finds that it can be an effective agent to address an appropriate target, the desired action will take care of itself. So using wording like investigate or call that the Academy explore or look into certain actions can typically be a nice way to word it so that the AAFP is not particularly bound to do a particular thing, but can actually use its resources in an effective way.
Kelly Castro, a program strategist from the National Conference of Constituency Leaders, recommended that we make sure to focus on what the AAFP can do. The AAFP does not have purview to instruct the chapters or outside organizations to do anything at all. The AAFP can encourage others, but we cannot tell them to do something. So be careful with your words. And that can be important because it's really easy to sort of get lost in being so excited about an issue that you just want the AAFP to act on it. But if you want the AAFP to, if you're basically asking for something that like the U.S. Congress could do, then you know that's outside of the realm of the AAFP. They can't really do that. So really be focused on what is it that the AAFP can do, and if it's something that they can't do, could the AAFP partner with somebody who could do that? And that might be a better way to word that in your resolution. Could the AAFP work with this group or that group to make such and such happen?
Great. So let's go through a few example resolve clauses. The first one here, resolve that the AAFP require that all family medicine residents be trained in acupuncture and massage as part of requirements for board certification in family medicine. Well, Brian, I think you probably know that this is probably something beyond the purview of the AAFP. There's lots of organizations that have a hand in family medicine and shaping family medicine. So I think this would be more for the American Board of Family Medicine, because they're the ones who really decide what constitutes board certification. So, maybe a better resolve clause would be that the AAFP recommend to the ABFM that acupuncture and massage be included as part of board requirements, but the AAFP itself can't necessarily make that change.
Sounds like fun, though. I mean, I guess I wouldn't mind how to do acupuncture or massage.
I like that.
Yeah, good life skill. Okay, let's look at another one. Resolve that the AAFP explore the creation of a peer-to-peer video guide for medical students on how to be a successful family medicine resident, to be made available on the AAFP website. So this is an example of a resolve clause that might be a bit too specific. So a peer-to-peer video guide for medical students on how to be a successful resident. So some of those things are within the realm of the AAFP. The AAFP could, theoretically, and is now putting together a video guide on how to do something. And certainly medical students preparing for residency is an important topic, and you'll see workshops here at the National Conference about how to be a successful interviewer and how to get your application together and all that sort of stuff. So some of that stuff's probably going into the thinking behind this resolve clause, so it might be better to get a little bit more broad, I think, in what it is that you're asking the AAFP to do. So maybe something better might be something along the lines of like that the AAFP could work with increasing its online resources for students who are preparing for residency and how to become a better resident, or something along those lines, and then leave it to the experts who work full-time at the AAFP on producing these sorts of resources to how they want to get those across. So just be mindful of that.
Great. The next resolution has 3 resolve clauses. All looks like on the same issue. Let's read through them real quick. That the first one is that the AAFP strongly oppose any state or federal legislation seeking to limit the physician-patient relationship. That sounds good. I think that the government relations folks would be able to do this. Second would be resolve that the AAFP create an online forum for physicians encountering such limitations to voice their concerns more directly. So this one, it mentions such limitations, so it already is a little troublesome because it can't really stand on its own. We don't really know, if we just saw this one first, what exactly we're talking about, the physician-patient relationship. So, and also, it'd behoove us to understand, is there already an online forum for this kind of thing? Is this something that the AAFP would have to develop from scratch? Or is there already a sort of a forum that would be appropriate for this kind of discussion? And the third is that the AAFP start a TV, radio, and print media marketing campaign speaking out against such limitations. So again, it doesn't quite stand on its own because it doesn't mention the physician-patient relationship. It also requests that the AAFP do a marketing campaign, which is going to cost a fair amount of change, I would imagine. So we need to be cognizant about what kind of financial resources are available to implement that kind of campaign, and whether or not the AAFP is able to do that in an expedient fashion.
Yeah. And these are all common issues with writing these resolve clauses. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do by any means, and so that's why taking full advantage of the staff and the faculty who are at the National Conference, at these resolution writing seminars that we'll have, and then talking to folks just in general, doing some research ahead of time, it can just be important for really nailing this down, because a lot of times there can be these things that you're not really thinking of ahead of time that end up being maybe redundant or such. So that's why we're showing some of the examples of these. So moving ahead then, what happens to a resolution once you submit it? So here's what the resolution submission form looks like. So in this, you have the opportunity to submit the title of your resolution, and then any authors. You could just be a single author on a resolution. You can have more than one authors. It really is up to you. And so depending on what your resolution is, I mean, you may want to have sort of a broader coalition of folks to sign on to your resolution, to submit them. You need to sort of think through your resolution and whether or not it pertains to students or residents or both, because you have the opportunity on this form to select that. Do you want to submit it to just the Student Congress or just the Resident Congress or both? And so the thing to keep in mind is that if you're a student, you can only submit things to the Student Congress. If you're a resident, you can only submit things to the Resident Congress. So if you're thinking that your topic would apply to both students and residents, then you want to have a co-author who is what you are not, a student or resident, to be able to submit it to that other Congress. So be thinking through that when you're filling this out. Anything else that I'm missing there, Richard?
Nope, that's right. And then you'll also print out a copy of your resolution to submit along with this form.
So what is the reference committee like?
The reference committee. Sure. So these are going to be folks who are either students or residents who are going to listen to these arguments on Friday afternoon and then meet afterward to discuss whether or not to recommend adopting this resolution or not adopting the resolution. And they'll basically be in a room, and you'll present in front of a microphone to these folks, and they'll be able to you'll be able to have testimony for and against these resolutions come toward this reference committee, and they'll be able to take into account all of the different testimony that's given, whether positive or minus.
And like we said earlier, this reference committee is the first pass on the resolution. So you have an opportunity. They'll consider all the issues that get brought up while this testimony is happening, and then they will put together this report on what they've sort of decided or recommended, and then they will submit that the following day to the Congress business session. And so this is when each reference committee gives these reports. They will talk a little bit about the discussion that they had as a reference committee about all of these resolutions, and then they will recommend some action on this. And as a Congress, as a student Congress or as a resident Congress, you can decide to go along with what the reference committee had to say, or not. And you could you can basically have more discussion on individual resolutions if you'd like. And so that's the opportunity where the whole Congress will get to discuss what it is that you're talking about. Final voting will take place. You need to be an official delegate to the National Congress, so these are usually student or resident state reps, to be able to vote on this. But any member, any student or resident can speak in their particular Congress.
Well, actually, one correction there, Brian. I think that for the voting, the delegates who come from each state, the delegate and the alternate delegate, are there to vote. But anyone can come and vote on these resolutions. So anybody who's around this morning can come. They can speak. They can give testimony, and they can vote. So the more folks there who are in the room and having a conversation and a discussion, the more interest that folks will have in these topics. Now, one clarification as well. So, during these business sessions on Saturday morning, we'll also be voting for new officers, so new leadership positions. And for those leadership positions, you're right, Brian. The delegates and the alternate delegates from each state are the only ones who can vote on those elections.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of. And so if you're listening to this and you are interested in running for one of those leadership positions, there is a list that is available on the AAFP website. If you haven't thought about it before now, you can decide that that's something you want to do when you're at the Congress. So feel free to keep that in mind. Consider it. We're always looking for great leaders, folks who are passionate about any number of things, especially family medicine, to be considering those. So keep it on your radar. So here again is the calendar that we showed earlier of how this is going to work. So those discussion groups, those will be available Thursday, and then the resolutions are due Thursday night. The reference committees will take place on Friday. That's where you give your opinion on your resolution. Then the reference committee will debate later that afternoon or evening, and then put together some documents that will be available on the app. So if you have the National Conference app, you'll be able to download their reports. and then further debate will happen with the whole congresses on Saturday morning, and that's where any student or resident can testify or vote, and that is usually a really fun time, because people get really excited about these issues, and this is a great time to sort of bring them forward to the AAFP.
Great. Just a couple of quick words about what happens to your resolution after you've had these debates and the voting has come down. So if it's adopted, then the Commission on Education will review the resolution and determine where to sort of shuffle it. Sometimes it'll go to the larger Congress of Delegates that meets in the fall with family medicine doctors from around the country. It might go straight to the Board of Directors. It might go to a different commission. Or AAFP staff might be able to make something happen that's been decided in the resolution. And most of them are referred to commissions, and the commissions we listed earlier, they also address resolutions at any time throughout the year. But the advantage of these commissions is that you have a student and a resident on each of these commissions. So ideally, the folks who get appointed to these commissions, which is a process that happens in September, so look out for that if you're interested in that. If you get appointed to one of these commissions, you'll be able to help usher this resolution that got passed through your appropriate commission.
And if your resolution is not adopted, then feel free to continue to research the issue further. You can talk to staff, and you can always resubmit next year. Really, the goals in putting these together is, it's not necessarily to get your resolution passed. A lot of the good of this process can come from basically talking with staff and hearing this debate with your peers when you're at these congresses. So it's not necessarily about whether each resolution passes or not, but being able to form sort of friends or colleagues or peers that you can reference, that you can talk to, that you can sort of continue these issues. That I think is probably one of the most exciting parts about being at the Congress in general, is because you get to meet these other advocates and just continue. So don't be disappointed if your resolution is not adopted.
And we have a few success stories. There's been not only a lot of great resolutions that have started in the student resident level and then made their way all the way up through the AAFP and become part of policy. But some of those have been quite successful in various other aspects of the Academy. Let's see, for example, we'll go to that second bullet point there. The AAFP Congress of Delegates adopted AAFP policy supporting civil marriage for same-gender couples, and that actually started in 2012 with a resident and student Congress resolution, and is now Academy-wide policy.
Okay, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to email us. You should see our emails on the screen there. We'll be around at the National Conference. We're really looking forward to being able to meet all of you there. And again, you can email them. You can check out the AAFP website. We're more than happy to talk about this process, and we love talking about it. It's been a fun thing for both of us to be involved with this. We've met great friends through the Academy, and I've worked on a number of issues that we've both been passionate about. And so, again, this is really cool. Not everybody takes advantage of this when they come to National Conference, but we wish that they did.
Yeah, please join us and come in on Thursday afternoon to one of the discussion groups. Great to see you.
All right, thanks for joining us, guys. We will leave it at that.
Bye-bye.